Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling, well, a really dense piece of teaching. It's deeply perceptual, challenging, and honestly quite confronting.
That's a good way to put it.
Our source material comes from Elder Johnson, who's a master Hebraist of biblical law, and he uses something fundamental, the law itself, specifically the laws about clean and unclean animals, to map out these specific destructive spiritual traits.
Right, and he crystallizes them into this archetype he calls the Raven Man. It's a powerful image.
It really is. So our mission today, if you will, is focused squarely on spiritual vigilance. We're going to unpack this doctrine, which interestingly frames the natural world almost like a living parable.
Exactly, a kind of instruction manual designed by Jehovah to help us spot these destructive human behaviors, things Jehovah calls an abomination. And these things often hide, right in plain sight.
Often under a veneer of spiritual legitimacy, maybe even competence.
That's the danger.
Yeah.
It's why this teaching is so vital.
And this isn't just abstract perceptual thinking. It's practical. It's about spiritual survival, really. The core idea seems to be recognizing these predatory traits in others, especially leaders.
But also, and maybe this is the harder part, examining ourselves ruthlessly for any sign of them.
Yeah. Today, we're focusing heavily on the raven, which is highlighted as unclean in the law, and how its nature mirrors these functions of darkness.
And the scriptural basis for even doing this is right there from the start. Elder Johnson points us to Romans 1:20.
Can you remind us what that says?
Sure. It essentially says that the invisible things of Jehovah, his eternal power and nature, are clearly seen. They're understood through the things that are made through creation itself.
So creation is the textbook.
In a very real sense, yes. It holds the key to understanding what's acceptable conduct and what's abominable. The raven isn't just a bird. It's a detailed lesson we're commanded to observe, understand, and ultimately reject.
Okay, let's dig into that foundation then, the concept of abomination, because that word carries immense weight. When the law calls something an abomination to Jehovah, what does that really signify? It's more than just disapproval, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to move past thinking it just means dislike. In the Hebrew context, the word tu'eva signifies something utterly detestable, precisely because it goes against the fundamental requirements of the covenant.
So it's not just a bad action, it's deeper.
It reveals a heart condition, a state of being that's so rebellious, so contrary to divine law, that it actually threatens the integrity of the covenant community. Understanding this status is crucial for seeing why the Raven Man figure is presented as so dangerous.
It's like the ultimate stamp of spiritual rejection. And the blueprint for spotting this, as you said, is laid out in Leviticus in the laws about clean and unclean things. And we can't just dismiss that as, ancient dietary rules.
No, absolutely not. Elder Johnson emphasizes these laws are given for profound spiritual instruction. They establish boundaries.
And the raven gets called out specifically.
Right away. Leviticus 11:15. The raven is declared an abomination among the fowls. But notice the phrasing. It's not just the raven.
Ah, you mean the every raven of his kind part.
Exactly. Leviticus 11:15 says every raven after his kind. That command is expansive. It means all species, all variations, and by extension, all spiritual operations that function like the raven. The rejection is total.
Why such a categorical rejection, though? With some other things, there seems to be more nuance, maybe, but here it's just absolute. Don't eat them, don't even learn of them, essentially.
Because the spiritual teaching is that the moment you start incorporating that nature, you risk adopting the entire corrupt system it represents. It's like a spiritual contamination.
So dabbling isn't an option.
Not according to this precept.
Yeah.
You have to reject the whole spiritual function. This sets up the core warning. You cannot invite an abomination into your heart, into your way of operating, and expect to remain in good standing within the covenant.
And that phrase, not to eat of them, that's where the spiritual lesson gets really personal, doesn't it?
It does. Because spiritually, eating isn't just literal consumption. It means internalizing their nature, adopting their methods, the scavenging, the opportunism, allowing their way of functioning to influence your conduct.
So if you start operating like a raven, taking advantage of others' failures, maybe deceiving people, thriving when things fall apart,
then you are, in effect, consuming the spiritual carrion they feed on. You're metabolizing abomination. And the teaching is stark. If you adopt the raven's nature, you yourself become an abomination in Jehovah's sight.
That's a very heavy pronouncement. It's presented as a legal status, not just a moral failing.
Precisely. It's a legal finding based on observable spiritual conduct.
And this leads directly to defining the Raven Man identity. These unclean fowls are described as predators of the air who transverse spiritual atmosphere as messengers of darkness.
Their inherent nature, their path, is one of destruction. They lead towards desolation. So the men who embody these traits, who operate this way, are identified as men of perdition.
Perdition, let's clarify that. It means more than just destruction, doesn't it?
Yes, it implies utter ruin, damnation. A fate determined by their own chosen path of destructive behavior. These aren't people making minor errors. They embody a trajectory towards spiritual catastrophe. They act as agents of chaos, often from within the structures they claim to serve.
And Elder Johnson apparently made it clear this isn't just some ancient history lesson. He shared something personal at the start of his teaching.
Yes, and you could sense his frustration, his disappointment. He'd been teaching these principles of discernment for years, right? It's the fine points of the law, how to recognize clean and unclean spiritual functions.
And then
He showed a video featuring someone he identified as a clear Raven Man figure, a spiritual predator, basically, deceiving people into thinking he was legitimate.
okay.
And the shocking part was the reaction from his own audience. People who'd sat under his teaching for years, who supposedly understood these concepts.
What did they do?
They filled the chat with amens, with praise for the man in the video. They were thanking Elder Johnson for sharing it, completely missing the point. They were easily deceived.
Wow. Even after years of learning.
Exactly. He was a powerful, real-time example of failed discernment. It showed that knowing the theory isn't enough. They knew the characteristics of the unclean, but they couldn't spot the Raven Man spirit when it showed up in a, modern charismatic package.
They were applauding the very thing they were warned against.
Right. And Elder Johnson was clearly disheartened. It proved how pervasive this deception is and how urgent it is to move from head knowledge to actual application.
That's a chilling reminder for all of us, I think. The Raven Man doesn't always look evil. Often they use the right words, sound comforting, seem helpful.
But if you can't apply the precept, if you can't discern the spirit behind the words and actions, the knowledge is useless. It's like knowing the definition of a poison, but drinking it anyway because the bottle looks nice.
He had to actually stop his lesson and address it directly.
He did. He had to point out, you are consuming the nature of the raven and cheering for it. This demonstrates a fundamental lack of spiritual vigilance. It was a wake-up call.
So having established that the nature of the Raven Man is the core issue and must be rejected absolutely, now we need to look at the specific actions that flow from that nature. And it starts with the Raven's basic function, scavenging.
Yes, the scavenger and opportunist aspect. Naturally, ravens primarily eat carrion dead, decaying flesh. They're literally sustained by death and decay.
They thrive on ruin. I think the source mentioned their numbers actually increase in desolate areas.
Dramatically. Sometimes up to 700% increase.
Yeah.
They are biological indicators of devastation.
Okay, so translate that spiritually. The Raven Man doesn't feed on life or growth.
No. He thrives on desolation. He feeds on what Elder Johnson terms spiritual carrion.
Spiritual carrion, what does that entail?
Think about the aftermath of a ministry collapse or serious conflict. It's the residue. The debt, the burnout, the unresolved arguments, the confusion over doctrine, the scattered flock, the weakened leadership. That's the spiritual carrion.
And the Raven Man doesn't come to clean it up or heal things.
He doesn't restore what was lost. He arrives to take advantage of the ruins. He sees the collapse of an assembly not as a tragedy, but as a buffet. He treats the defeat of others as his personal opportunity.
So when division hits, when people leave, when resources are depleted, when morale is rock bottom, that's when he shows up.
That's when he starts circling. He sees the vulnerability.
And the timing itself is presented as a form of treachery.
Absolutely critical. He doesn't show up during the heat of the battle when the assembly is strong, fighting the good fight. That would require courage, commitment, risk.
Too dangerous for him.
Right. He arrives strategically after the defeat. He waits for the dust to settle, for the faithful fighters to be exhausted or gone. Then he descends, facing little or no resistance.
That's a crucial distinction. A true shepherd stays with the flock during the storm.
Exactly. The Raven Man waits until the storm has passed, the sheep are scattered, maybe the shepherd is wounded or discredited.
Yeah.
Then he enters the picture.
Appearing like he's there to help, to pick up the pieces.
Precisely. He positions himself as the sensible, stable alternative now that the previous leadership has failed. But his real goal is scavenging, claiming what's left.
And what are those remains, spiritually speaking?
It's spiritual capital, sometimes physical assets, property, bank accounts, equipment. But more often, it's the intangible things. The mailing lists, the contact information for members, the loyalty of those who are confused and hurting, the established doctrines he can now twist or claim as his own discovery.
He makes a plausible case, presumably.
Oh, very plausible. He might approach the remaining elders or disillusioned members saying, look, clearly Jehovah's hand has lifted from this ministry. Let's transfer the remaining resources, the people, the influence to my ministry where it can be used effectively. He sounds reasonable.
But his authority is completely unearned. He wasn't there in the fight.
Exactly. He might even claim he saw this coming, trying to sound prophetic, reinforcing the idea that he's the wise successor. But the teaching is clear. Once the resources are gone, the people dispersed, the structure fully dismantled, the Raven Man moves on.
He doesn't stay to rebuild.
Never. He doesn't plant, he doesn't water, he doesn't engage in the slow, patient work of restoration. His pattern is to find the next collapse. His presence signifies ongoing ruin, not recovery. He's like a spiritual parasite.
Okay, this is disturbing enough, but then there's the layer of cunning intelligence. It's not just instinctual scavenging.
No, this is where it gets really chilling. The source links the Raven Man's methods to the known intelligence of actual ravens, and they are remarkably smart birds.
The teaching mentions the intelligence equivalent of a 7-year-old child. That's significant. That implies planning, strategy, not just reaction.
It does. It means the deception isn't accidental. It's deliberate, complex, and manipulative. Ravens use tools, they solve problems, they even seem to understand cause and effect in ways that suggest sophisticated cognition.
And how does this translate to the Raven Man's spiritual operation?
It means he employs calculated strategies. For example, the source notes ravens can mimic sounds, including human speech, over 30 different vocalizations.
So the Raven Man can mimic the language of faith. Sound righteous, sound compassionate.
Perfectly. He can adopt the jargon, quote the scriptures, express the right emotions, but it's mimicry, designed to disarm and deceive. It lacks the genuine heart condition.
And the deception goes beyond just words.
Yes. The source mentions ravens using tactics like false caching, pretending to hide food in one spot to mislead other ravens while secretly stashing it elsewhere.
Okay, I see the parallel. The Raven Man creates diversion.
Exactly. He might stir up a minor controversy, a doctrinal debate, or focus everyone's attention on a small issue, while his real objective, perhaps gaining control of finances, undermining a leader, or securing loyalty, happens unnoticed in the background.
Wow. Calculated distraction.
And even more complex, they've been observed calling larger predators, like wolves, to a carcass they can't open themselves. The wolf tears it open, and then the raven swoops in.
Using others to do the dirty work.
Precisely. Spiritually, the Raven Man might instigate conflict between others, plant seeds of discord, or encourage division, knowing that the resulting chaos will weaken the structure and allow him to pick up the pieces. He benefits from the fight without ever having to engage directly.
Proverbs is quoted here. He disassembleth with his lips and lay up deceit within him.
Yes, Proverbs 26:24-26 is a stark warning about this type of character. It says, even when he speaketh fair, when he sounds reasonable and kind, don't believe him, because there are 7 abominations in his heart.
That speaking fair is the most dangerous part, isn't it? The smooth words.
It's the ultimate trap. He'll approach the wounded, the confused, the grieving, with words that sound like wisdom and comfort. But the underlying motive isn't healing, it's absorption. It's taking control. He might even use confidential information shared in trust during vulnerable times as a weapon later on.
Systematically dismantling trust while appearing helpful. That's deeply treacherous.
It's inherent to the archetype. Cunning deception is a core tool.
Okay, this leads us into the 4 specific spiritual abominations that Elder Johnson identifies as marking the Raven Man. These aren't just character flaws, they are specific violations that classify someone as to Eva abominable. First up, covetousness and theft.
And right away, covetousness is equated with idolatry. That's from Colossians 3:5. This link is fundamental.
Why idolatry? How does wanting something become worship?
Because the covetous person, according to this teaching, essentially worships their own desire. They elevate what they believe they deserve above what Jehovah actually provides or ordains for them. It's a profound statement of misplaced worship and entitlement.
That feeling of I deserve this, even if it belongs to someone else or came through someone else's labor. That fuels the predation.
Absolutely. It becomes the justification. The Raven Man feels entitled to the resources, the influence, the followers of a failed ministry because he sees himself as more capable, more anointed, more deserving. It justifies the theft in his own mind.
And this theft isn't always literal grabbing of cash, is it?
No, it manifests in subtle ways too. Seizing spiritual authority by force or manipulation. Stealing credit for work done by others, taking sermons, teachings, insights, and presenting them as original.
Stealing influence. How does that work?
By manipulating relationships, spreading gossip to undermine rivals, positioning oneself strategically to intercept loyalty or opportunities meant for others.
And the teaching connects this to manipulating weights and measures. That seems specific.
Very specific and very significant. Deuteronomy 25:13-16 directly states that using unjust weights and measures dishonest standards makes one an abomination unto Jehovah.
So how does that apply spiritually?
It implies that dishonesty in evaluating worth, distributing credit, or acknowledging contributions is spiritually equivalent to theft and idolatry. When a raven man takes a doctrine taught by a previous leader and passes it off as his own revelation, he's using false weights. He's stealing the weight of that teaching, claiming merit that isn't his.
He's distorting the spiritual economy, so to speak.
Precisely. He's cheating the system of honor and truthfulness that should govern covenant relationships.
Okay, the second abomination, deception and treachery. We touched on the cunning, but this seems more about the overt acts.
Yes, and Proverbs 12:22 states it plainly. Lying lips are abomination to the Lord. This isn't treated as a minor infraction. It places the habitual liar in the same spiritual category, abominable as those unclean creatures.
Because truth is fundamental to Jehovah's nature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Lying fundamentally misrepresents reality and violates the nature of God, who is truth. And the raven man's primary tool often involves bearing false witness, which violates the commandment in Exodus 20:16.
He doesn't just tell small lies, he attacks reputations.
Yes, he bears false witness against neighbors, against other ministries, against leaders, anyone who stands in the way of his agenda. He actively tries to reshape reality through slander and misinformation to achieve his goals.
And this ties into treachery.
Yes. Treachery here is described sometimes not as a long, calculated plot, but almost as foolish behavior leading to unfaithfulness. It's a reckless disregard for loyalty, integrity, and sound judgment, which inevitably results in betraying those who trusted him.
Third is perdition and violence. This might sound counterintuitive if he's not physically attacking someone.
But the spiritual violence is intense. Isaiah 59:7 says of such people, wasting and destruction are in their paths. Their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed innocent blood. The operation itself is inherently destructive.
And how is innocent blood shed if not physically?
Through character assassination, through relentless false accusations. When a raven man deliberately destroys someone's name, their reputation, their standing in the community, their ability to minister effectively, the teaching equates this to shedding blood.
It's considered murder in Jehovah's sight. That's incredibly serious.
It is. Think about the impact. Physical murder ends one life, tragic as that is. But character assassination can destroy the faith of many who witness it, paralyze the victim's calling, and sow widespread distrust and fear. The victim is spiritually silenced, crippled.
Unable to function, unable to defend themselves effectively.
Exactly. And the raven man often operates subtly here as a whisperer, like Proverbs 16:28 describes. The whisperer separateth chief friends.
So, not always loud public denunciations.
Often not. It's planting seeds of doubt, sharing concerns privately that are actually calculated slander, turning allies against each other, all done under the guise of being helpful or discerning.
Weaponizing information shared in confidence.
That's a classic tactic, taking personal weaknesses, past mistakes, private struggles shared in trust, and using that knowledge later to destroy the person's credibility. It's profound spiritual violence, clearing the path for him to scavenge the wreckage.
And the fourth abomination ties it all together. Spiritual adultery and unfaithfulness. This seems to be about covenant betrayal.
Yes, and Elder Johnson uses the story of Noah's Ark, specifically the raven Noah sent out, as a key illustration here.
Right, Genesis 8:7. The raven went forth to and fro. But the crucial part is...
It never returned to the ark. It abandoned the place of covenant safety. Why? Because it found what it preferred out of the floodwaters of judgment? Floating carcasses. Spiritual death.
It chose immediate gratification, the rotting meat, over the covenant relationship represented by the ark.
Exactly. And this is contrasted sharply with the dove, which found no place to rest and did return, demonstrating faithfulness even in difficult circumstances. The raven represents complete covenant abandonment.
So the raven man archetype is someone who ditches the hard path of covenant commitment when easier, more immediately rewarding options appear, even if those options are spiritually dead.
That's the picture. He might abandon a struggling ministry for a more prosperous one, or compromise core beliefs for worldly acceptance or gain.
And that phrase, going to and fro, there's a darker parallel there too.
A potent one. It directly echoes Satan's response to Jehovah in Job 7:7, when asked where he'd been, from going to and fro in the earth and from walking up and down in it. It signifies a restless, predatory spirit, unanchored, lacking a true home or commitment to Jehovah's established order.
This unfaithfulness is then explicitly linked to worldliness.
Yes, citing James 4:4, friendship with the world is enmity with God. Anyone who embraces the world's systems and values while claiming to follow Jehovah is identified spiritually as an adulterer.
It creates an impossible contradiction, as the source puts it.
You can't serve two masters. The Raven Man tries. He maintains a facade of serving Jehovah while actively pursuing worldly power, status, wealth, or acceptance. He's building his own kingdom, not Jehovah's. The teaching even suggests they can operate worse than a common harlot because the betrayal happens under the guise of faithfulness.
We've covered the specific actions, the abominations, but the teaching seems to indicate there's a root cause, a foundational flaw that enables all this, and that's pride.
Absolutely. Pride is presented as the engine driving the Raven Man's behavior. His ability to steal, deceive, and betray stems from this deep-seated sense of superiority and self-righteousness.
Proverbs 16:18 comes to mind. Pride goeth before destruction, and the haughty pride before the fall. It's the setup for ruin.
And it's something Jehovah explicitly hates. Proverbs 6:16 lists a proud look among the things Jehovah detests.
Proverbs 30:13 describes that look, doesn't it? A generation with eyes that are lofty and eyelids lifted up. It's a spiritual posture.
It signifies arrogance, looking down on others. The Raven Man genuinely believes he's better, smarter, more deserving than those he preys upon.
So when he sees desolation, he doesn't feel compassion.
He feels satisfaction, or at least justification. He looks at the ruins and thinks, they deserve this, or if only they'd listened to me, or I would never have made such foolish mistakes. This self-exaltation blinds him to his own flaws and prevents any real repentance.
Pride also acts as a barrier to receiving truth.
A huge barrier. The sources emphasize that someone walking in pride literally cannot receive true revelation from Jehovah. The mysteries, the deeper wisdom, are hidden from the proud.
Because they think they already know it all.
Essentially, yes. If you think you've got it all figured out, Jehovah has nothing he can teach you. Elder Johnson apparently connects this to a modern tendency to boast about human achievement.
Like thinking we are all of that because of our technology or science.
Right. People get puffed up by human capabilities, creation, invention, and forget their limitations. They start attributing divine levels of wisdom or power to human ingenuity.
And that blocks access to true wisdom.
Because humility is the prerequisite. Recognizing your limits is the starting point. As the source puts it, the moment you realize I'm limited, that's when God takes control and give me the wisdom that I desire. Pride slams that door shut. The Raven Man is armored in arrogance, unteachable.
And this pride leads directly to the final brutal characteristic, the unmerciful heart. The teaching uses the parable of the wicked servant from Matthew 18 here.
It's a devastating parable for illustrating this point. It exposes the hypocrisy at the core of the Raven Man's pride.
Remind us of the setup. A servant owes the king an impossible debt.
10,000 talents. The source calculates this as something like 200,000 years of wages, an unpayable astronomical sum. Only the king's sovereign grace could cancel it, and the king does forgive him completely.
An incredible act of mercy. But then,
Immediately after receiving this unfathomable grace, the forgiven servant finds a fellow servant who owes him 100 denarii, a manageable debt, maybe 100 days' wages. Significant, but nothing compared to what he was forgiven.
and he refuses to show mercy.
He doesn't just refuse. The parable says he laid hands on him and took him by the throat, demanding immediate payment.
Taking him by the throat, that's specific. What's the significance of that action?
It's an act of violence designed to silence the debtor, to prevent him from speaking, from pleading his case, from asking for patience. It physically stops the victim's voice.
Just like the spiritual violence of character assassination aims to silence the victim's witness or ministry.
Exactly. It's a physical picture of that same silencing, controlling, violent impulse. And it reveals the core hypocrisy. The Raven Man demands limitless mercy for himself, but offers absolutely none to others, only judgment.
The king's judgment on him is severe, then.
Swift and total. He's called a wicked servant and handed over to the tormentors until he should pay all that was due, which, of course, is impossible. The mercy he received is revoked because he refused to let it flow through him.
And the key is the heart condition. Jehovah requires forgiveness from your hearts, Matthew 18:35 says.
Yes. Superficial forgiveness, just saying the words while holding on to bitterness, resentment, or a desire for vengeance that doesn't cut it. The raven man might say he forgives, but his actions and his merciless spirit betray his true heart. That refusal of genuine, heartfelt mercy leads directly to divine rejection. The standard is clear. If you can't forgive your brother the small debt, Jehovah won't uphold the forgiveness of your massive one.
Okay, this paints a very bleak picture of the Raven Man. But now we have to tackle a potential complication, a scriptural point that might seem contradictory, and one that Raven men could even misuse to justify themselves. That's the story of ravens feeding Elijah.
Yes, 1 Kings 17:2-6. This is a really crucial passage for understanding Jehovah's sovereignty and how the elect must navigate complex spiritual realities.
So Jehovah actually commanded ravens, these same unclean, abominable scavengers, to feed his prophet Elijah.
He did, at the brook Cherith, which the teaching interprets as the brook of separation. Twice a day, morning and evening, they brought him bread and flesh.
How does that work? If the raven represents all these negative things, abomination, covenant breaking, feeding on death, how can Jehovah use it as a channel for provision? Doesn't that blur the lines or risk contamination?
That's exactly the tension Jehovah seems to want his people to understand. The provision itself, the bread and flesh, spiritually representing knowledge, doctrine, sustenance, was necessary and good.
But the delivery system was unclean.
Exactly. And here's the absolute crucial point from the teaching. Jehovah commanding the ravens did not sanctify the ravens. They remained unclean, abominable creatures.
So using them didn't make them okay.
Not at all. What it proved was Jehovah's absolute sovereignty. He can command anything, even an abominable creature, to serve his specific purpose for his chosen ones. He doesn't need perfect vessels to accomplish his will.
And there was a lesson for Elijah in this too.
A profound one. It was humbling. It forced him to recognize that his survival depended solely on Jehovah's direct command and power, not on his own righteousness, not on his own efforts, and certainly not on the worthiness of the delivery channel. His sustenance came despite the uncleanness of the messengers.
So any provision or even truth delivered through an unclean channel, through a raven man type, is strictly temporary.
Temporary and circumstantial. It was never meant to be a permanent pattern. The ravens served only for that season at that specific location until the brook dried up. That was the signal the assignment was over.
And then Elijah was sent elsewhere.
To the widow at Zarephath, interpreted as a place of refining, a place connected to covenant faithfulness. His next provision came through a righteous, albeit struggling, human channel. The raven is used instrumentally, but never embraced or validated.
So the ultimate lesson for us in discernment here is,
You receive the provision Jehovah sends, even if the messenger is unclean. You take the necessary bread and flesh the truth, the knowledge, the temporary help. But you do not invite the raven into covenant relationship. You do not adopt its methods. You do not internalize its nature. You don't eat of their nature.
receive the message, reject the messenger's spirit.
Precisely. The entire point of this doctrine, Elder Johnson stresses, is to equip you to discern these spirits, refuse their influence, and overcome their tactics, even when paradoxically Jehovah might use such a figure to deliver something you temporarily need.
It requires incredible spiritual maturity and discernment not to confuse the provision with the provider or the temporary channel with a trustworthy partner.
It does. And the presence of raven-like figures operating in a spiritual space is often confirmation of existing desolation, even if they bring some momentary benefit.
Like squatters confirming a property is abandoned.
That's a good analogy the source uses. Citing Jeremiah, it notes that when Jehovah declares a place desolate, the presence of creatures like ravens or dragons confirms that judgment. They aren't legitimate residents enjoying blessing, they are scavengers occupying ruins. Jehovah doesn't count them as his people inhabiting his promise. They signify the ruin, they don't negate it, and we are commanded to know the difference.
Wow. Okay, this has been an incredibly deep dive, really unpacking the nature and function of this Raven Man archetype. We've seen those core operations: seizing by force, thriving on desolation, deceiving with cunning, abandoning covenant loyalty.
And the critical takeaway, the application for every listener, boils down to the consequences of internalizing these traits. It demands that intense self-examination, like 2 Corinthians 13:5 urges, examine yourselves.
If you find these marks in yourself, the quickness to accuse, maybe covering for false witnesses, feet that are swift to run towards mischief, that unmerciful heart we talked about,
Then according to this teaching, you're not just making mistakes. You are aligning yourself with the spirit of abomination. You risk becoming an abomination to the Most High God.
And the consequence is ultimate rejection.
Jehovah will utterly reject those who bear these marks when they stand in judgment. The source uses a powerful analogy. These abominable actions are like spiritual toxins. If you internalize them, like swallowing poison from a cleanser bottle just because you need the bottle, it changes your spiritual nature.
You become contaminated.
Your soul becomes like that squatter's camp in the desolate city, a place Jehovah refuses to inhabit because it's filled with the principles of ruin, not life.
Before we wrap up, let's circle back to that initial point. Elder Johnson made his frustration with his audience's lack of discernment, getting fooled by the Raven Man in the video.
Yes, that lack of practical application is key. And we have to consider how our own environment might be conditioning us. The cunning, the manipulation, the treachery of the Raven Man. Sadly, these things are often normalized, even celebrated in worldly culture.
You mean in entertainment?
Yeah.
Things like reality TV, maybe some political dramas, even how news is sometimes presented.
Exactly. Ask yourself, do the shows you watch, the media you consume, inadvertently train you in the Raven's methods? Do they present strategic manipulation, backstabbing, stealing credit, or character assassination as entertaining, or worse, as necessary skills for success?
Like it's just playing the game, or being smart, or telling hard truths.
Right. If you find yourself consistently entertained by or identifying with characters who operate this way, who thrive on conflict, deception, and tearing others down, you need to seriously examine your heart.
Because Proverbs 23:7 says,
As he thinketh in his heart, so is he. If you marinate your mind in the tactics and spirit of the Raven through your entertainment and cultural intake, you risk unconsciously adopting those same methods in your own life, your relationships, your work.
you become what you behold, essentially.
You risk internalizing that abominable nature you are commanded to reject. It's a sobering final thought. What are you consuming, and is it shaping you into something Jehovah accepts? Or something, yes, he utterly rejects? That self-examination is paramount.